Welcome to the Mostly Legal Podcast. I'm Amanda Koplos, Chief Operating Officer at Sheffield, Lohman & Wilson, a mid-sized law firm based in Central Florida.
And I'm Rob Joyner, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Centerbase.
So Rob, today we're speaking with Ari Kaplan, who is the principal of Ari Kaplan Advisors, and he is the person to know in the legal tech space. He is a speaker and he leads a virtual lunch. He's just all over the place.
I was actually on that virtual lunch. But the more exciting thing about this episode is I got a new uncle.
Okay, you are ridiculous. I think I just disassociated during that entire section.
Forget it. Let's just jump in.
All right, today we are joined by Ari Kaplan. And Ari, I'll let you tell us a little bit about your background, but before I do, I need to just warn Rob, like Ari is a professional, so you really need to be on your best behavior today. Like no shenanigans, A game, like, you know, he's the real deal.
We've done 10 minutes of pre-call already.
So Rob, just to make you feel comfortable, I'm very palsy with my nephew who can be mischievous but not as mischievous as Uncle Ari, and we'll go out to dinner and we'll sit next to each other and want to do something mischievous, and I joke that we're the only members of the best behavior club. So now you get to be a third member of our best behavior club because of the mischief, just to set the tone.
Only if I get to call you Uncle Ari for the rest of the episode.
The shenanigans begin already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
yes.
but jump into your background, Ari.
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've seen many of these, and I feel lucky to be part of now this community. So I'm an analyst that covers the legal industry, which is a kind of a made-up title. I practiced for nearly 9 years and have been on my own it'll be 20 years in a few weeks. And so when I practiced, I published nearly like 125 articles over the 9 years that I practiced. And so I felt like I was sort of a writer and a lawyer walking this road simultaneously. And at some point, I just started walking on the writer road. I would joke with people that I was a lawyer on the side, which obviously wasn't possible. But I would, write in the middle of the night. I mean, I'm feeling like Rob, who's way more successful than I am as a writer, as a painter and as an artist, can appreciate that. And so I started out thinking I would write freelance, like articles about technology, because I had been writing for all these different technology magazines about the internet. I practiced between 1997 and 2006. And so when I first started writing, I was writing about technology and very cool stuff. And in the early days, you could write for a lot of really impressive places because there just weren't a lot of people writing about the intersection of law and technology. So I wrote for Wired and I had a column in eWeek magazine, and I was writing the cover story for Computer User and all these other stuff. It was really and then of course I wrote a lot about legal tech. And then I started ghostwriting when I went on my own, because I have a sort of a unique look at what legal tech and legal services are doing with technology, at least back then, 20 years ago. And that kind of led me into doing market research. I was doing a lot of white papers, and someone approached me and said, would you consider interviewing a whole group of in-house counsel and then putting that together into a report? And I thought, sure, except nobody is going to take my call. Like, there's not one person that's going to take my call. And actually, this is actually, I should give credit to Debbie Caldwell, who's now at Platform, but she was at FIOS at the time, and she said, I think people will talk to you, and we'd like to structure it in a way that would make you feel comfortable, but we're confident that this is going to work. And to her credit, as many people as we wanted to were considering taking my call. I put that together into my first report, which was for FIOS, and I've done over 70 of those now. So I sort of think of myself as a market researcher, but really I've sort of grown into this role as an analyst because I'm studying both the corporate side and the law firm side, so the buyers and the sellers, and in fact, do a lot of research on the technology companies and also do research both here in the US and abroad. So I occupy this wonderfully unique and fun position that gives me a lot of opportunity to do exciting things and talk to really, really extraordinary individuals.
Well, you're like the person to know, right? Like if somebody knows you, they're a big deal. Like we're big deals
They
just
point
because
You're
when he's in the
you're
room.
you're
That's Ari.
huge.
That's
You're a
Ari.
big.
There he is right
our
He
there.
says he stands alone in this office by himself. I'm the guy to know. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
our status was immediately elevated the second you said yes for us. Okay, so tell us a little bit. You have a background in journalism, though, also in addition to going to law school, right? And so you started kind of working for this newsletter, and it kind of snowballed from there, right? When you were at the law firm.
Actually, I don't really have a background in
Oh,
journalism.
so Rob got the note wrong. Okay, great.
Well, I'll tell you the story. I'm fine with all of my history. I think it's because when I think of a background in journalism, I think of someone extraordinary like Bob Ambrogi or David Horrigan. I
Ari, I thought you had a journalism your degree. Your undergrad was in journalism.
Nope, my undergraduate degree is I did a double major in political science and
You
economics.
just
Well,
doubled down on
I,
being told you were wrong. I don't
I
understand why
know,
you
I
did.
know. Yeah. We
This is
all have to
fun.
have a place.
You guys are crazy. Um, Essentially, what happened was when I was in law school, a friend of mine was the editor in chief of our law school's newspaper. And he said, listen, we need somebody to lay out the newspaper.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And I said, what does that mean? He said, it means you need to learn how to use PageMaker at the time. I don't think
Uh-huh.
people use
Uh-huh.
that anymore.
Yep.
And that actually is a paying job. The school pays for that and also includes a substantial scholarship. And I thought, I'm your guy. That's it. I'm the guy. And so I taught myself how to use PageMaker, and it was
Hmm.
great because I could listen to music. There was nobody in the office. I would lay out this paper, and I was called the managing editor, and it was great. And every once in a while, I would write something. Maybe I remember once one of the civil procedure professors had a baby, and I wrote a profile of him as a new dad teaching, and yeah, I think there no like hard hitting extraordinary news, but it gave me some practice. Lucky for me, the person who interviewed me for my first job saw that I was the managing editor of the newspaper and asked me about it in the interview. And I said, well, I'm the managing editor and I do some writing, and I showed him the clips that I had. I wasn't like, oh no, I'm this extraordinary journalist. And part of the reason he hired me was because he wrote a column for a publication, and when I started on day one, he said, hey, I write this column, which means we write this
Like your
column. And to his credit, he gave me a co byline on every single article that we wrote. And so by the end of my first year of practice, I probably had 10 bylined pieces, and that was really what I found passionate. I was really excited, and then at some point, I think this was 1997, 1998, I said, we've been writing about, because at the time I was doing international trade and customs work, and he said, I said, we've been writing about, the importation of Chinese wood, and that's really, or like what would constitute a feather that was importable that you could put on a blouse. And I said, but I think we should write about the internet. The internet seems like a thing. And I understand that this is our practice, but this is very cool. A lot of cool stuff is happening. It was really funny. He was like, you know what? I'm going to keep writing about my thing because he was extremely successful, the industry standard. And he said, but if you can get your work done, bill your time, do our article, you can write about as much as you want, and I'd support you. And he did. And that really kind of set the foundation for what I've been doing for actually much more of my career than practicing law.
Writing about the internet. Start.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, it
great.
started right, right.
So, so Ari, just going to that point. So you get your bachelor's degree in journalism, you
Mhm.
get your JD, then you end up go, then you end up then you end up working in
At
a
least you
law
did
firm,
that on purpose.
writing on the side. When did
Yeah.
you make that actual jump? Like, what did you even say to that partner if they were still around when you made that jump?
Um, it's a great question. So I had been practicing for nearly 9 years at this point, and I talked to my wife and I said, "Listen, I think that I could do this. I think I could make a career out of this. Because over the years, what had happened was originally I was writing and obviously not being paid. Most lawyers write for visibility to highlight their expertise, which is totally appropriate. But at some point, I started getting paid. People would say this article pays $2,000 or $3,000 or $500 or something like that. It was actually, it's funny because it sort of comes full circle. The very first publication that ever offered to pay me was a website called Prairie Law. And
Okay.
Prairie Law was started by Kevin O'Keefe of
Okay.
LexBlog fame. And everybody knows Kevin O'Keefe. He's, sort of a really an all-star in legal and a wonderful mentor of mine, a wonderful supporter of my career. But the very first publication that ever offered to pay me was this website called Prairie Law. And because I had pitched them an article about something, maybe FTC standards on something, and they said, "What are you thinking of in terms of compensation?" And I was like, compensation. And I was just like, I don't know, $20. Like I couldn't even think of like what's the right number to be paid for something I would do for nothing. And they said we pay people $250. And I said, $250 sounds like a nice, great. That's great. And then that became a thing. And I was like, wow, maybe I get paid for stuff. And it really, once you start writing for mainstream publications, or I had this column, when I had this column, they brought me into the studio, took headshots because they put a headshot with my column. It was very exciting. And so I've been doing this for really, a while then, for many years, I guess, and getting paid. And it could have been I'm trying to think of like what the number ended up turning out. It wasn't a livable wage, but it was a substantial kind of bonus that was helpful and fun. And I said to my wife, I was like, I think I can do this. And my wife, it's funny because I said to other people and they were like, you're crazy. You should, right. You should stay being a lawyer and trying to go the full distance. It's, and I liked the law. I'm still very close to my mentor, who was my mentor in the early 2000s. We have such a close relationship that my mentor, who's extraordinary, was recently honored and asked me to introduce her at this
Oh, wow.
ceremony honoring her leadership and accomplishments. And I felt very proud. And I think it spoke volumes about our relationship and what an extraordinary mentor she was and continues to be, that I hadn't worked for 20 years and still she felt like I should introduce her. And so the firm was great. I was lucky to get really, really good experience. For a big firm, I took depositions, I had argued motions in court, I led teams of people. It was lucky work, which is a sort of a theme that I use a lot in my career. And but anyway, I asked all these people. They said, that's a stupid idea. Do not leave the firm. Do not leave the law. And my wife, to her credit, said, I think you should do what you think is going to make you happy, and trust that you'll figure it out. And
Wow.
she was right. And she several years before that, she had started her own law firm when our son was born. And 23 years later, that's still a thriving firm, and she's in herself just an incredibly gifted lawyer. I don't think she would have said, Ari, start your own firm, but she thought, Ari, you do you. And
So basically, she was like, "You
I'm
would be
grateful to her.
great at writing." Yeah.
We did talk about a lot of ideas, and we still today joke. Even to this day, it comes up. She's like, remember you were going to get an office on whatever avenue? And she's like, that would have been a terrible idea. And I'm like, you're right. And I have heard that message. I heard it 20 years ago. I heard it now. I know that would have been a bad idea. But so far, so good. It's like we have a little bit of a fun banter, you can imagine. It's like a sitcom. My life is a little like a sitcom.
So is mine. So is mine.
Can
I
I
get it.
ask
Yeah.
you, so during COVID, you shifted to your like lunch, and I can't remember what I think it's called, your lunch bunch or something. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Did I get
Ari's
this
lunch
right?
bunch.
I
It's
don't know.
called
I
the
can't
it's
remember.
called the
Uncle
virtual
Ari's
lunch.
lunch bunch.
Uncle Ari. So what's funny about that? It's so funny that I
We just
started
make
this.
things up here. We have no idea
No,
what we're
but
talking
it's
about.
funny that I started this because there's a connection to the pandemic. So when my niece and nephew were homeschooled, they were all on remote school. They're going to be 13, so you can go back. They were like, I don't know what that is, first grade or something. They were very young, and they had to do school on Zoom, and they just wanted to have a call with Uncle Ari. They wanted to do Zoom call with Uncle Ari, Zoom call with Uncle Ari, and I was like, great. So my sister-in-law sets it up. We have this Zoom call with Uncle Ari, and my nephew and I have this call, and as soon as he gets on, he immediately puts me in like a breakout room. But it's only the two of us on this call. So he like relegates me to the breakout room, and then he goes to have lunch or something. And I am sitting in this breakout room doing nothing. And I'm like, you know what? He's now the president of the Best Behavior Club because that was awesome. I cannot believe the mischief in this guy. It was so funny. I was like, this guy and I, we have a connection. It was very cute. Anyway, so what happened was on Monday, March 16th, 2020, we were all, going to be home. And so on the weekend, I think it was Sunday, I posted something to LinkedIn and I just said, hey, looks like we're going to be home for a while. Like, I think I wrote 2 weeks actually. And that was me optimistically thinking this is going to be 2 weeks and we're back. But as long as you're home, I said, I'm going to open up a Zoom link. And if you want to join, great. I'll see you, give you a little networking in the middle of the day. I don't know who's going to pop on, but if you want, great. And I got a zillion kind of comments, direct messages, and likes and stuff like, this is a great idea. We need this. People like, we need this in Italy and we need this here, various connections that I had, in different places. And so I pop on the next day, and I think there were 10 people, like all people I was really happy to see. Not that there are ever people I'm not happy to see, but I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe so-and-so from Amsterdam or so-and-so in the UK or so-and-so. And I was just like, this is so cool. Like, I'm so happy to chat with you. How's it going? We were like sharing information, like what's going on by you? And can you go out? And what are you doing? And in the early days, we'd talk about where are you getting masks, or how are you organizing your calls, or do you go on camera? If you go on camera, what should the lighting be? It's like all of you remember all of these interesting things. And then at some point someone suggested, I'm pretty sure it was my colleague Shireen Clark, who said we should have a guest. And I was like, is that a statement about how boring this is or how chaotic this random call is? And she's like, no, but I think that would be fun. And I'm pretty sure our first guest was Jordan Furlong. And I asked Jordan if he would come on and chat with us. And he did. And we got a great crowd. And I was like, wow, guest. And so it ended up being that we would have these random, people would show up. And then on Fridays, we'd have a guest. And then we started. And Rob, of course, honored us in the early days, I think, of your art career and
Yes.
showed us. Rob was amazing. He showed us what he was, what he was doing, what he was working on. It was really, really, really exciting for us and very, very cool. And then we'd have a day for people to show a demo. We'd have technology companies show a demo. And it has lasted. It has lasted for over 6 years
So
now,
what's it
and we
actually
are
called?
on.
It's not the lunch bunch.
It's called the virtual lunch. It's called and I
I bet you're
usually
wishing you
change
had named it.
and I change the signs. I like every month I have a different sign, and it says virtual lunch on it, and we have a theme. And so I have since moved it to Fridays only. So after the 6th anniversary, which just took place, and we're on something like episode 1350 something or something
Wow.
like that. I've moved it to Fridays, but I would like to say that for the different milestones, the virtual lunch community is a wonderful group of people, and they would want to have a celebration of the 100th episode, a 200th episode, the 1,000th episode, or something like that. And so for the and so then I realized, people are really interested in this. Maybe I could use this for good somehow. And for the 6th, and I've done this over the years, but for the 6th anniversary, I made a $600 donation, and I reached out to a bunch of companies in the space, and I said, oh, would you consider matching my donation as a sponsorship of the virtual lunch? And it ended up raising almost $13,000. It
Wow.
Wow.
was really very
Wow.
cool.
That's
There were
great.
so many companies from all over the world who were, just like immediately like, yes, great. whatever you need. That money, I should say, went directly to a place called the Apostles House, which is I serve on the board of trustees proudly of this organization that empowers homeless women and children in Newark, New Jersey. And so that donation wasn't to me. It went directly to the Apostles House, and as all those donations do. And I've tried to use the virtual lunch for that purpose in a lot of ways, to just let people know about important causes or issues, and just giving smaller organizations in need visibility beyond their local region
Yeah.
can be very helpful for them.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Centerbase, legal practice and management software designed to deliver optimal efficiency, profitability, and business growth for your mid-sized law firm. Learn more about how Centerbase helps you practice, manage, and grow your law firm with modern technology at centerbase.com.
That's awesome. I enjoyed participating. I enjoyed following along with that. I mean, it's incredible to keep anything going for 6 years, especially with an audience, with events. But then to turn it into something where you're giving back is really, really neat. So on those lunches, you heard from tons of people. You understood trends around masks and all this fun stuff during COVID. Now you're an expert on AI, right? And you're hearing tons about AI.
I am just such an expert on AI. I've used Claude, and I'm the same expert everybody else is. I just have the benefit of getting to learn from and speak to incredibly smart people. I will tell you that I had the really incredible career privilege of interviewing the general counsel of Anthropic yesterday for an event I participated in with LexisNexis. They had an AI symposium at the Harvard Club, and Jeff Bleich, the general counsel of Anthropic, agreed to be the keynote in our fireside chat, and I was lucky to be asked to do the interview with him, and it was just incredible, like a wonderful conversation, and to be able to sit side by side with someone of that caliber, it was really an honor.
Rob's an early Claude adopter.
So, yeah, my question totally changes, Ari. What were like the top 3 things that you learned during that session?
I think the biggest takeaway was the element of humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is an individual. I mean, his background is so remarkable. He was the U.S. ambassador to Australia. He had clerked for Chief Justice Rehnquist. He had served as a partner at several firms. He's been the general counsel of different companies. I mean, just all of the boxes of extraordinary in legal, and in society, he is certainly checked. And he really spoke very eloquently about the importance of balance, but the importance of character and not losing that in the face of technology. He also talked a lot about the value of making kind of calculated mistakes when you're trying to drive innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Mandy, you know this, as running a law firm, like, there's a really important element as we evolve in our profession of recognizing that although we are heavily reliant on past practice and precedent and managing risk and being really conservative when it comes to certain types of decisions, it's also important to reach as a profession, reach in our careers. And he really spoke about those points, about managing his team, which has grown substantially since he joined the company, and obviously never a dull moment in an organization like that and in an industry like that. And you're right, though, I have been lucky to do several different types of research looking at AI since, over the last couple of years, but obviously very recently. It's a focus. You can't really get away from it. I started including questions about it in the last couple of years, but now I'm producing research that specifically focuses on use cases or value propositions or transformation.
So, Ari, in your research, when you put the terms AI and ROI together, where does it lead you?
It's a great question, and I was lucky to do a report that came out probably 5 or 6 weeks ago with Legora. And Legora asked me to interview their clients in 14 countries and ask not only about what they think of Legora, and, incidentally, they love Legora. Their clients love them, and they would recommend them. There were all those different metrics that I captured that are in the report, but also to try to understand the impact of usage. And you could extrapolate, right? I was asking specifically clients of one company, but to their credit, what they were trying to do was also explain what this does industry wide. And so we're really trying to look at this from the impact on revenue, the impact on work quality, and then the overall impact on the greater business of law. What does that transformation look like? And so we asked questions like, what is your response time, or what does the quality of your work look like? And people said, 94% said they can respond faster to their clients and to stakeholders within the organization. When I asked about work quality, one of the key things that comes out all the time is that, gosh, these tools help me identify things I might not have thought of or might not have seen. And that's especially true of people at different levels. And so over 70% said that Legora identifies issues that otherwise would have been missed. And then, of course, I asked about what's the impact on the business of law? What does this look like from a transformational standpoint? And almost 2/3, I think, talked about this idea of having a transformational impact on their use of AI and what that looks like from an infrastructure standpoint at their firms.
So, when you're talking about like from the associate attorney level, like where are they really seeing the biggest gains? So, you know, the benefits, we know the benefits, but where are attorneys really seeing the biggest gains?
This is so in my research, what I tried to do was to give something of a roadmap to help firms take data that they already have, financial data, business development data, recruiting data, peer reviews of different things. And in fact, yesterday at this AI symposium that I participated in, I also was lucky to moderate a panel discussion with a CFO of a big firm, the chairman of a big firm, and the general counsel of a large company. And my panel discussion was about reimagining legal economics.
Mhm.
What does the law firm of the future look like? What is the relationship between corporate legal departments and law firms? And right now, there is a tremendous benefit towards efficiency, but efficiency isn't the best metric. Just being able to do something more quickly or getting an answer more quickly isn't really in isolation what we're looking for. In many ways, what you're trying to figure out is what is the result of greater efficiency. And for a number of people that I spoke with, the result is that they can now maybe take work they wouldn't have been able to take. Maybe
Mm.
they can scale their organization in a way that's more effective. Maybe there's work they would have declined because they didn't have the people, they didn't have the resources, they couldn't kind of handle the time frame. But now, in this case, Laura, they were able to look across a spectrum of a huge volume of documents, get answers quickly, and make a proposal that would be beneficial to the client and also allow the firm to operate maybe on a leaner team, which
Yeah.
also then gives the experience to people they might not have gotten. So I was very lucky because my mentor, when I was practicing, would at any moment I would say, you know what? I've been reviewing these documents for a long time. I know the material. Could I take the next deposition, or could I defend in the next deposition? And she would always say, great. And then she'd immediately pull out her calendar. She'd be like, Tuesday in Toledo, you're it. Book your
Mhm.
flight. And I'm telling you, that was exactly how it went. And then I'd say, I took the deposition, I reviewed the documents. Could I, you know, argue the motion? And she'd be like, uh, there's a motion on a month from now on a Wednesday at New York Supreme, you're on. And like you don't get that. That's just not often how it works. It's certainly at a junior level. I mean, I was a junior, almost mid level, but I was pretty young and inexperienced. And she knew that she used to always say the if you don't take the lead, the view never changes. And
Mm.
so she lived that, and I think that she continues to do that now, and I think that that helps, and that's the benefit. Although you're seeing different benefits at different levels. I spoke to people at different levels, and I do different kinds of reports for different groups, and so the perspectives change. For junior people, there's a question of judgment, as you know. There's a question of trust, and as a result, the the tools may not be as beneficial to someone who can't judge the results as well as
Right.
someone who's more senior. They say that AI works best for people who already know the answer. And because of that, there's a distinction in who gets the benefit. Lots of people talked about mid-levels being in a sweet spot or senior
Hmm.
associates, and I would agree. However, I think there's a great opportunity for junior people who are willing to spend some more time and upskill. I love the stories about Rob painting off hours and squeezing it in. I used to call that stealing time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
In between. I mean, my children, I'm super proud of them. They're adults now, but when they were little, and it was like life of the Cat in the Hat, where my wife is running back from court and I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to a game and I have to drop my daughter off, and then I was like, I have to finish something. I have a deadline, but the deadline's actually fungible because it's not really work deadline. It's this deadline, and you want to get it all done, and you have this juggling act, and you're balancing on a ball with a rake and a cup and a fish, and the whole thing. I think that if junior professionals are willing to take on add a little of that manic to their life, they will find opportunities that their peers don't, because they will prove more quickly that they can use their judgment to make decisions about these tools, because we're not going back, right? The tools are here and they're only getting better as we
Right.
continue to use them. The question is, are we getting better at using them? And that's where we are in the moment.
And how does that reframe what the associate does and how many associates are hired for firms too? I mean, I think the stat last year was associate hiring was down 15%, I want to say. Um,
This just came up this morning only because I'm speaking at the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium conference next week, and I'm moderating a panel, someone from a corporation and someone from a law firm, both very focused on pricing, and this conversation about what does that mean? The funny part of that question was that the corporate person was very eager to hear from the law firm person,
mm,
because they're all kind of in it together. That was the thing. That was the thing that came out of my panel yesterday, which was the the leader of the law firm and the leader of the law department, both all stars, really well recognized, just exceptional leaders in their space, very well known, were commenting about trying to get to equilibrium. The
yeah.
law firms obviously are trying to figure this out. They're investing tremendous amounts of time and capital in getting to a point where they can use these tools in a way that disrupts but doesn't catastrophically change the business model. And the law departments recognize that they need the law firms. They're the person that's going to validate and is going to provide ultimate guidance. So they don't want to get rid of them. They're just trying to figure out what that rebalancing looks like. And we've had disruptive forces in legal before, whether it's external situations like the pandemic or the financial crisis, or technology like this that is transforming things. And you can go all the way back to the use of computers and email and cloud, et cetera. But we've had this before. My sense is that
I
legal
always
will.
use legal research.
Well, that came up. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting point. I mean, I will say that in the conversation yesterday, there was a really interesting discussion about having legal research that's of the caliber of LexisNexis, because that was the sponsor of the event, but of that caliber that you can, inherently rely on, because it's designed to be the the endpoint, and using your AI tools that relies on trusted and gated and verifiable information in the same way that humans will need to build trust and validate everything that they're using these tools for. But the tools are getting substantially better, so we need to grow with the ability to use it. I think that was a really important point that's come out of a lot of my work.
Yeah.
Can I shift gears a minute and ask you about the mid-sized law firm report that you did?
Yep, sure.
And so that while AI was a portion of that, it also touched on a lot of other trends, and we talked, for that report as well. So some of the things you talked about was like some of the strategic challenges that mid-sized firms are having. Can you talk about some of that that you found for that report?
Yeah, so I've been doing this report for several years, and I have also been lucky to just directly engage with mid-sized firms in particular through my work with the ALA, speaking to ALA chapters. I've been lucky to be invited to speak at over a dozen chapters and several conferences, and have been doing this report for several years. Last year's report, I did it with our friends at Affinity Consulting, of course, at iManage, and at SurePoint. I know you know them all. And I think what's important about the trends and the strategies there is that you're seeing an interesting realignment of the competitive advantage that technology provides to mid-sized firms. So in the same way that I mentioned, you can take a massive volume of documents, you can review it quickly, and firms could all of a sudden provide work that they otherwise would have turned down or wouldn't have had the scale or the individuals and the manpower to deal with. And in fact, on the manpower point, I spoke to a leader in a corporation recently, and they said, we used to use law firms for manpower. We don't need their manpower as much anymore, but we need their judgment far more.
Mm.
And that was a really interesting description of the shift that's taking place. And so for mid-sized firms, I think what has come out of the report year after year is that if firms can replace fear of emerging technology or digital transformation, if they could be more methodical about leadership shifts, about succession planning, if they could really identify new markets, if they could use their financial data more effectively to determine what's truly profitable, then they can compete in ways they may not have been able to even just a few years ago.
Mhm.
And those themes really resonate. I hope to do the research again this year and to try to verify some of those conclusions. But I'm actually so honored when I get to talk to the mid-sized law firm leaders that I speak to, because they're kind of operating in this really interesting universe where they have fewer resources than their larger peers, but the same caliber of talent, the same objectives, and
And
the
the same
same.
clients.
That's right. That's right. And so they are seeing, many of them are seeing that there's the technology gives them a promise they didn't have before. And
Yeah.
so the landscapes are shifting. Of course, the landscapes are shifting from behind them as well. Like smaller
Yeah.
entities are able to compete in ways they weren't able to. So you're seeing this come from the back and in the front, and just from a size standpoint. And I think that that's a really important area to be mindful of.
Well, tech is really what's helping us get our hands around financial data, right? Because for so long, and I've been in firms now for 21 years, and so we've always collected the same data. We just haven't been able to get it out and analyze it. And you're restricted to what your financial reporting system can give you. If you want to run this by this, if that report isn't native, if you can't pay to have it built, the data isn't coming out, if you don't have a way to interact or to chat with your data, for lack of a better term, if you don't have that ability, you can't make decisions based off of it. So one of the benefits we are seeing is technology allowing us to actually get our hands around it without having to buy, these huge Power BI products and things. Like our native platforms are doing this now, and I think that's really going to help taking advantage of data from our side.
You're also seeing people able to teach themselves how to do certain things and how to leverage certain data much more quickly because the tools are more user friendly. But people realize now that there are ways to teach themselves. I mean, I'm a little bit of a fix-it guy. So, I've disassembled my washing machine, my refrigerator, my dryer, my
Rob's like,
printer.
I called somebody for that. I called somebody for
No, but
that.
like, and my wife, my dad was incredibly handy, and so thankfully he passed that down to me. I always joke that when I was a kid, my dad used to always make me hold the flashlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it used to drive me crazy. And he'd be like, I need you to hold the flashlight. And I'd hold the flashlight, stand there forever. And he'd be like, I need to focus on this, focus on the red wire, focus on the copper piping or whatever. And then sometimes he'd have me do it outside when there was light already. And so as a teenager, it took me a long time to figure this out, but as a teenager, I was like, I'm out of here, Dad. I'm not holding the light for you on the garden. And I realized as an adult, he never needed the light. He just wanted me to learn and pay attention to what he was doing. And I did. And I'm grateful to him every day. And so I think that people realize, if my washing machine breaks, my wife's like, oh, there's a OE error. And I'm like, go on to YouTube. OE error means there's a valve. It's like one of three things. I tried the things that are easy. It's never the easy things. And I'm like, all right, I looked at it. It says you got to take off the top and, remove this. And she's like, what are you, how are you? I was like, there's a guy or a woman. They said, this is how you fix it. And I was like, I'm just going to follow them. It's junk anyway if I can't fix it. So we're good. And it's
Rob,
just,
if your washer has an OE error, are you A, buying a new one, or B, buying a new one?
So let me tell you something, Amanda. Last night the kids were taking a shower, or trying to, and the little stopper broke. And so to go from bath to
Yes.
shower,
Yes,
So
yes.
so I took it all apart, took a picture of it, gave it to Claude. Claude actually diagrammed it for me. Then I figured out the piece was actually broken. So I ordered new parts, and I'll be fixing it this weekend, Amanda.
I am
on
shocked
video.
to
He's
hear that.
Oh, I will be on video now. Yes, Amanda. I will tell you all about it as I'm fasting and as I'm thinking about a Peloton ride.
Oh my God, why are we
That's
friends?
actually a great point because I had to move a television,
Mhm.
off the
The
wall or
mount?
something, and
Yeah.
it's screwed on with a special kind of screw. And I was like, I've never seen this before. I guess I didn't put the TV on in the first place. And I took a picture of it. I put it into ChatGPT. I was like, what is this? And what tool do you need to remove this? And it's like, oh, it's a security hex something. You need this tool. And I was like, can you find me the link on Amazon? And found me the link. It was the craziest thing. And then, like as Rob said, that you order a part, it comes in 2 seconds. Then I was like, I took it off. It was
I didn't
so.
even look for the part. It gave me a link, you know?
Anyways, I'm incredibly handy and fix everything around my house. So, but I'm a YouTube person. I guess I haven't ever used Claude. Maybe I'll do that next time. But yeah.
Hey,
So,
Ari, I have so many directions I could go with it. The conversation. I like to think of, at the end of the year, the dictionary comes out with the word of the year, right? The Webster comes out with the word of the year. In legal tech, if you were to jump to the end of the year around legal tech and AI, what do you think the word of the theme is going to be for 2026?
Wow, Rob.
did you
Great
just
question.
use AI to build that
He
question?
just used
That's like
AI. That's
the
a great
most
No.
What is
intuitive
the
question you have
question?
literally ever asked on this show.
It's so interesting that you said that because I always tell my kids to try to enjoy the adventure. Especially as they've gotten older. I'm like,
Right.
I know you're concerned about this or you're thinking about that, but imagine this all as like one big adventure. Like then how exciting is it? What does that feel like? What does that look like? I feel like there's something about that in legal this year, but if I were to pick a word, I don't want to use like something so common like transformative, but I feel like uh, pivotal. I feel
Mm.
like this is the crossover year, and this is when you're not even just seeing use cases of stuff. You're seeing people very thoughtfully consider what they could do to if their business was disrupted in a really material way, what would that be? And why don't we do it to ourselves? And actually,
Huh.
the general counsel who was on my panel yesterday said we try to disrupt ourselves before anyone else does in her company's business. And my one of the very first articles I wrote to try to develop a portfolio of technology related pieces was a book review of Clay Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma, which is the foundational book about disruption in technological disruption and disruption in business. And so it was just meaningful to me that she brought that up. And so my sense is that this is sort of the pivotal year.
Law firms are always so far behind, so it would make complete sense to me that we were 3 to 4 years behind the rollout of generative AI when we're actually starting to do something with it. So that makes sense to me.
Well, but I think that law firms shouldn't give themselves such a bad rap in the sense that it's not like there are a huge number of giant enterprises have completely transformed how they work because of AI. They've
Yeah.
bought a tool, they've rolled that tool out enterprise wide, and then some people are really productive at that tool. I think that people should be realistic about where they are in the journey, and they're not so far behind. I feel like I feel lucky in my work to conduct, I don't know, hundreds of interviews every year about this. And so, for example, I do an annual general counsel report with FTI and Relativity. And then every once in a while, like a group of general counsel will invite me to speak to their groups about, they have local groups of GCs, and the question will always come up like, how are we doing? Where are we relative? And I'm like, you're fine. You're
That could
fine.
actually be the word of the year because there's
You're
so
fine.
much.
The phrase.
You're fine. Yeah, like there's so much fear. We're all like for mid-sized firms and us, Rob, we're all freaking out. Like, are we going to be behind? Are we picking the right tool? Are we using governance correctly? Are we getting the right guardrails in place? It's are we? So it's like, okay, you're fine.
My word is governance. I
Yeah,
mean,
go.
that's what I've thought about. But to your point, Amanda, I mean, I woke up first thing this morning. I woke up, checked my email. First email is so and so invests in an AI first law firm, not a legal tech company, law firm. And to your point, it's coming at us all so fast that it is hard to keep up with. But for the most part, you're fine.
You're fine.
Just be fine. Maybe that's the title of the episode. Ari Kaplan, you're fine.
You're
You're
Well,
fine.
I also think that there are fundamental aspects of what we do that matter more than the technology we're using, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you approaching client service? Can you do that better? Can you be more responsive? Can you be more thoughtful?
Mhm.
Can you be more proactive in the business of your client? Rather than, hey, we applied a tool, it saved us an hour. I
Yeah.
think that if you were somehow so deeply embedded in the business of your client and you could provide them with a level of guidance that speaks directly to how they could succeed, you would give yourself a competitive advantage far more than any piece of technology. Now, if you could leverage a great piece of technology to do that even better, that's the kind of the combination that people are really hoping for. So when they're thinking of, are we this, are we that, the first question should be, how good are we at what people expect us to be doing? Could technology make us better? What would delight our clients? That kind of conversation isn't happening as much as, should we license this? Should we buy this? Which tool is going to make us faster or something? And people kind of miss the point. We are in a service business.
Yeah.
And in a service business, you want to serve. And I think that that element tends to get lost. But when you speak to leaders who are really attuned to what that ultimate objective is, they really start to map out a strategy that keeps that front and center. And I think that's and I try to, so I host a breakfast series called the Legal Tech Mafia, and I do it in uh, typically every other month in New York City, and typically host it at a large law firm. But when I travel, I'll do it. I just recently did it in Dallas. I'll do one in, I think, San Francisco and Chicago, do one in London and Amsterdam, wherever I'm happen to be going. I try to do a breakfast and try to bring people together. Anyone is invited. If you're at a law firm, you're at a corporation, you're with a vendor, you're a consultant. I want all voices. Everyone is heard, and I think that's kind of how community is built.
Hmm.
And we talk about these issues, like what does client service look like, and what's great technology, what have you been using? Let's share some ideas. Kind of like, hey, where did you find a mask? It sort
Yeah,
of goes
yeah.
back to that. It's sort of a theme in terms of what I've been trying to do. It's sort of like now I'm the guy holding the flashlight, and I think that that's an important part of my career.
That's fun. Now, so
Well,
now everybody's. I looked at the time, Amanda. Everybody's at this
I know.
point
We could
sitting in
do a
their car.
5-part series on this. Yes.
Everybody's sitting in their car waiting to get
Uh-huh.
out and go into the office, right?
Yes, yes, they
Because
are.
we're at that point in the episode. So,
Yes,
Amanda, do you want to
yes.
transition?
Yeah, so thank you, Ari. We finish all of our episodes with a little section we called Pitch Your Passion. And you briefly mentioned an organization earlier, and you could talk about that a little bit more, or really anything else you're passionate about. Floor is yours.
Wow. Yeah, so I serve as a member of the board of trustees for an organization called the Apostles House, and I think that it's really important to be thoughtful about how we can empower others. And I think that's a real theme of my work. I'm trying to empower people with data, with information, with perspectives, with community, and I think it's consistent through all the things that I do, just in terms of my work, and got involved with the Apostles House actually because my daughter who's now almost 21, but when she was 6, I asked her, I'd read about somebody in Tucson, Arizona, who had this campaign of asking his neighbors if they would leave a single can of food on their front steps. And his promise to them was, if you leave a can of food, well, I'll pick it up and I'll deliver it to a food bank. And kind of made it easy for people to do good by doing something very simple, but in the aggregate turns out to be incredible. And so I asked some of my neighbors as an experiment, and my daughter and I were home on a Sunday morning, and I said, hey, you want to go outside? I asked some people to leave some cans of food on their front steps. I'm curious to see if they left it. Do you want to come with me? She was adorable. And she's like, yeah, 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 great. And she runs upstairs and she gets like a baseball cap. She used to always wear these fun baseball caps. And she got a notepad and a pencil. And I was like, what's the notepad and the pencil for? She's like, I've got to write down what we get, like to keep inventory. And so we started walking around our neighborhood, and sure enough, we found a little bunch of cans of people in front of our house. And I thought, this is great. My daughter's writing down, vegetables. She's like, Daddy, how do you write? What is green? Is green 2 E's? And, we're like, right, green beans and carrots. And it was like a really fun experiment. We started doing spelling and counting and writing. I didn't realize all of a sudden I have this great way of teaching my daughter. And we did this for many years, and we would collect over time. We had collected thousands and thousands of cans, like every single week, like the virtual lunch of just like
Right.
just chipping away at something, and just seeing what happens. And I think your career is like that, frankly. And so, anyway, I'm pointing because I'm sort of looking out on the street, and we had collected that. My daughter was like, I guess at like 7 or 8, we were invited to speak at a school. So here's this 8-year-old telling other 4-year-olds, what she's doing with cans. And just the whole thing was very good. And at some point, we got to the point where she started driving us to deliver the cans because we'd bring it to a food bank. And, just sort of became full circle. I couldn't be prouder of her. It, of course, became a family affair, obviously. My
Right.
wife was very involved. My son became very involved. And we were sort of the can people. And and that's how we would deliver it to the Apostles' House. And then over time, they had given us an award for all of the work that we had done. And then I got involved in the leadership. And I just think that in a lot of the things I do, I host a run at almost all the actually every legal conference I go to. I kind of put together a run, or I participate in the run or lead the run, depending on what the conference allows me to do or asks me to do. And I always tell people I make a donation to lung cancer research in memory of a buddy of mine who was a young man and got lung cancer, never smoked. And I always make a donation to lung cancer research. And it's funny because the Lung Cancer Foundation, it's called Lung Cancer Foundation of America, has reached out to me. They're like, who are you telling about this? We just got all these donations. And I was like, amazing. I love it. People want to run. And I always say to them, and maybe I'll leave you with this, but every time we start, it's usually like a beautiful morning. Sometimes it's not, but it's a morning we're there. And I always say that, no matter what, we're just so lucky to be together. Like, we're out here, it's beautiful, we're capable of running or walking, we should be grateful. And it's like a great way to start that activity. And I think that I try to keep that in mind for everything I do.
That's beautiful.
Well,
All
Uncle
of that,
Ari,
and you don't even have a journalism degree.
Yeah.
Uncle Ari, thanks for joining us today. It's been a fun time.
Thank you so much.
You guys are great. That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mostly Legal podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
Stay tuned as we uncover more behind-the-scenes stories of law firms with the best minds in the business. And Rob.
Thanks.